Good morning. I'm Pete Najarian. This is The Take on this Thursday morning, and it's been an incredible week again. We just continue to say that because it is. And we look at where the volatility has moved to. We look at some of the shifting in the markets. And yesterday, certainly the turnaround, the turnaround we saw in the Dow, that was pretty staggering. We had triple-digit gains to the upside, finished down about 100 points, but it was really the NASDAQ. And the NASDAQ, the leadership to the downside in the NASDAQ, a pretty powerful move to the downside, down about 2% yesterday, about 240 points, 250 points to the downside. And what were the leaders of that? Well, they've been the leaders to the upside as well. So the initial leaders were the semiconductors, and the semiconductor space was actually down 3%. Now, this is coming after going all-time high, all-time high, all-time high. It seemed like forever, and we'd seen a lot of movement in the NASDAQ to the upside as well. And a lot of that really driven, not as much by the big cap tech names like it had been, but much more of the diversified move when we had the semiconductors and add in the biotechs, which also pulled back yesterday. Biotechs were down about 2% yesterday. So the combination of all of that really kind of pulling on the markets. And of course, there's a lot of different names that were pulling as well. You had Zoom and DocuSign, Netflix, Facebook, Moderna, Tesla, all of those names pulling, and that's why we had such a dramatic move to the downside in terms of the NASDAQ. And Mike Wilson from Morgan Stanley has been talking about a pause, and when would we maybe get a pause? And he's been essentially hinting at the idea that we are in that position now where it seems like it would be time for a pause. And so that was something that stood out. We actually had another Morgan Stanley analyst on yesterday on the halftime report who was reiterating a lot of what Mike has been saying. And the two of them seem to be very much joined in their opinions in terms of industrial strength, materials strength, some financials starting to get a little bit more heat and moving. And that certainly could be the areas of the Dow specifically that could move not only the Dow, but obviously the S&P as well. And we've had some pretty strong moves there. So the volatility index did spike, especially when you see what was going on with the NASDAQ, but that move to the downside, the volatility index actually moved up about 7.5% yesterday, up into the upper 22. So that was something that definitely stood out. Also, the volume yesterday. We talk about this all the time, and I talk about the growth of what we are seeing. It's incredible, the growth that we are seeing in terms of volume, and the volume in the derivatives market yesterday, again, almost 42 million contracts, actually 41.8 million contracts trading yesterday, 2 million plus for Apple. You had 1.6 million for Tesla. And then you look over at Pfizer. Pfizer traded about 880,000 contracts yesterday. That's less than 1 million, obviously, but and it's still number 3 on the list, but that's 230% of the average daily volume. So it gives you a little idea of just how much activity is going there. And we talk about these vaccines all the time. We talk about these various stocks, and we talk about Moderna, we talk about Pfizer, we talk about AstraZeneca, and so many more, but all for the right reasons. And we are continuously seeing more and more activity there. We talk about biotech and the big strong moves that we've had. Yesterday, obviously a bit of a pullback. So energy also. Energy has been a really, really interesting and intriguing space for a while now. We had highs yesterday in the XLE. We actually got up towards that 41 level. The XOP continues to see activity as well. As a matter of fact, even today, we are seeing some activity in the XOP. So you look in the energy space, you look at the OIH, you look at the XOP, you look at the XLE, all of those various indices, and you can see a pretty strong pattern to the upside. And we've really seen a lot of unusual option activity. As a matter of fact, a little hint might be leaning towards one of those names. It's not going to be an ETF today. As you know, and I've talked about this time and time again, the ETFs are not really what we're looking for, but we'll occasionally highlight them because they will move. But we'd much rather have the individual name. So I might have an energy name for you on the individual at the end of this in terms of the unusual option activity that we're seeing today. And there's been a lot of unusual option activity already today. And why? Because the markets have been shifting all over the place. Early on, come in, it looks like the Dow's about flat, maybe down about 20 points or so, but a pretty decent hit once again to the NASDAQ. It was down about 0.5%. That's in the pre-market. Then we get in, we get the jobless numbers, and suddenly you see the NASDAQ down 100 points. That's a pretty significant move. And the Dow down about 100 points. Not as significant of a move when you consider it's 30,000 point index. But first 30 minutes, completely flipped, and suddenly we had come all the way back to relatively flat for the Dow and actually into the green for the NASDAQ. Well, now the NASDAQ's actually sprinting to the upside. It's up about 50 points, at least the last I looked, up about 50 points, but the Dow was starting to slip back down once again. Now, yesterday, we had the big IPO market, and DoorDash definitely stood out. Everybody's been talking about a variety of names. Airbnb, DoorDash are what everybody's been focusing on. Why? Because DoorDash was yesterday, Airbnb today. It had an extraordinary move yesterday when you see where the pricing was and to where it opened, but DoorDash did pull off of those highs that it had hit, and it's pulling off again today. Airbnb, meanwhile, looks like it wants to move to the upside in a big way relative to where the pricing ended up, where it's priced now, and where it looks like some of the indications are where it might actually open. So that's something that really stood out. Now, you look at the jobless numbers. We were up over 850,000. The problem is they were looking for about 730,000. So it didn't seem at first to really have that big of a reaction to the markets, but eventually it did. And it's something to take note of. But certainly we are seeing a lot of different activity. And as I said, now the dislocation once again, but this time to the positive with the NASDAQ actually moving to the upside as the Dow is moving to the downside. So what were some of the leaders for the lower side of the NASDAQ early on? It was Tesla, it was Uber, it was NIO, it was Apple, it was Palantir, all those names, throw in Moderna and Zoom. Those were what was pulling it to the downside. But we got that quick flip. And where were we seeing the activity? Well, of course, semiconductors. They started to move off the lows. Tech started to move off the lows. Biotech started to move off the lows. Industrials were down a little bit. Financials down a little bit. But that, more of an emphasis there on the Dow and also obviously on the S&P. So a pretty big bounce out of that biotech off of those lows. And I think the combination of those is actually what's really propelling what we're seeing right now, at least in the NASDAQ. And obviously things can change in a hurry, and they certainly will. We have this big IPO again today. So a lot of excitement about that. That'll be talked about all throughout the day on the network. It was talked about yesterday with DoorDash. Airbnb, this is a monster. People have been waiting on these IPOs, and Airbnb, from the indications that we're seeing, looks like that's going to be a monster. So we'll see. I'm trying to get a quick look on the TVs up there. Nope, I'm not seeing anything just yet. So energy, that is an area that's absolutely strong. You look at the S&P and you look over and you see all of the usual names that I've been bringing up on a consistent basis. Less about Exxon and Chevron, far more about Apache, Occidental, Diamondback, Devon, EOG, all of those names. You look at the XOP, and we talked about this one the other day, and I said, ETFs, we normally don't like to highlight these for the unusual option activity, but this one just stands out. It's up 4% plus today, and a little bit less of a move out of the XLE and the OIH, up about 2% or thereabouts, maybe even a little bit more. But the XOP and those names absolutely reacting today as we're watching energy move to the upside. So materials also moved off of the lows and actually pushed right into the green as well. So we've been talking about that for a while. Materials, we talked about energy and specific areas in the marketplace that look like they want to start shifting around. And we're seeing far more activity in Vale, in US Steel, in a variety of the different names in the basic material space. So volatility, yeah, it's in the 22s, but most importantly, unusual option activity. I teased it already. I talked about energy. It is energy, but it's a specific name. It's not an index. It's XOM, Exxon Mobil. After just getting beat up a couple of weeks ago, or maybe even a little bit longer ago than that, we started to see some speculative upside buying in XOM. And a name that we love, obviously, for a long time. I've owned Chevron for an extremely long period of time. I actually bought XOM, the stock, based upon what my feelings of liking the stock, liking the dividend. I don't know what they'll end up doing with the dividend, but I don't expect a whole lot of movement there. And the fact that we could see some, I could sell some options against that, that just seemed like the better play. So today, Exxon trading about 42.80. We had a buyer of 4,000, and this isn't a week out, this isn't a month out. They went all the way out to April. The April 55 calls going for about 80 cents, and that's way out of the money calls. As I said, stock was trading under 43. They're buying the April 55 strike calls. So expecting some kind of movement to the upside. Doesn't mean or doesn't have to move to 55. If it moves to the upside at any kind of a pace between now and early part of the year in 2021, these will start to react. So that's something to keep an eye on. And I think that unusual really did stand out. Now, I got a couple of questions from people, and then Another busy day. We had a busy day yesterday. I'll tell you what, the halftime report, it was great. A lot of you, thank you very much for all the positive commentary about the view and all the beautifulness of what they were seeing in the background. And my wife did a great job helping out yesterday. And then again on the 5 o'clock show as well. So thanks a lot for that. And I'm back here in the same spot, just had to come inside, a lot of work going on outside. So Pete, discuss AMD, please. Well, AMD is not going to go straight up in a straight line. We've seen continuous paper in there, very bullish paper, and I expect to see this stock actually at some point, not too distant future, start to break through 100. We've seen a lot of 100 strike calls as well as higher than 100 strike calls being bought there. So, hey, Pete, thoughts on GM today? GM has been a really impressive stock. And GM, Ford, when you look at some of these names, and we talk about the EV space all the time, we sort of buzz past those names. But you look at Ford, you look at the F-150 and some of the moves that they're going to be making, GM as well. I think these names are definitely well worth a long look. As a matter of fact, I'm long some Ford calls right now because of the option paper that we'd seen in there. I'm not in GM right now. So I guess that's your answer there. Pete, are you still in Rocket and Apple 130? Yes, still in Rocket, still in Apple. The Apple, as you know, went out to January, so we got a little bit of time with those, and we've seen a lot of option activity recently in Rocket companies. So that one's definitely something that stands out. Thoughts on Snowflake? You know, we talked about a lot of these IPOs the other day. Obviously, that's in focus. And what have been the areas that have seemed to have had really some incredible moves and the anticipation of what was to come? Well, Snowflake, definitely one of those. That was where the question is here. There's no doubt about it. Snowflake, a monster. Palantir, a monster. People just looking for specific areas in the marketplace that could be hot, and that's what they're looking for. And people talk about shifting around and people selling to go into some of these other names. I'm not so sure that's it. I think more of the money that you're seeing going into some of these different IPOs is money that's maybe been sitting on the sideline, less about selling out of other positions and more about actually going in to some of these names from some of that money that's been on that. There is a lot of money that's sitting on the sidelines right now. One last question, and then we're going to run. Palantir in the near term. Not a huge opinion on that one, and we've had some call activity. We've also had some put activity in there. As I mentioned earlier in the week, the call activity that we'd had about a week or so ago, unfortunately, it waited until Monday for the move, so we missed out. I missed out on that one because those expired on me, but that happens. You know what? I still, it tells me the paper was right. They just missed the time frame on this particular one. But we've seen a lot where they've been absolutely accurate with some of these different moves. Any new unusual option? Yes. Somebody's asking about Virgin Atlantic Space, SPCE. Yes, we had some call buying the other day. I know the stock's down a little bit today, but we had some call buying the other day. I own the stock. I had calls written against that. But when I saw the unusual option activity that came in, I actually did buy those calls as well. I thought it was a nice, inexpensive shot. And so I like the opportunities there. Love your Florida shirt, Pete, laughing out loud. I appreciate that. It's kind of, it's a little bit of a Florida shirt. Maybe it's even a little Tom Selleck shirt from those days too. But it's a beautiful day here. It looks like it's going to push close to 70 degrees. We're enjoying our trip. And I'll tell you what, my wife does an amazing job driving. I'm sitting in the back. I'm oftentimes trading. And so it really works out. She enjoys the control of being the driver, and I enjoy the control of being able to still trade and be a part of the markets as we've been making this journey from Minnesota to Lincoln, all the way down, all the way across, and now going south into Florida. We'll be going a little bit further south actually later on today. Folks, have a great day of trading. Look forward to seeing you tomorrow on Friday. God, it's been a great week already. I hope you are very smart about your decisions and very disciplined about what you're doing. And please make sure you have the knowledge in the options industry. As I mentioned, almost 42 million contracts. That's a monstrous day yesterday. And we've talked about monster days, what seems like forever in 2020, but specifically in December, we have had incredible amounts of activity on the unusual side of things and in the derivatives markets as a whole. Folks, have a great day of trading.